Guys, I'm Dr. Kim Sage, and I really wanted to share this video with you after I made another video that I have not posted yet. But as I made the video, and I will be posting it, it's about how we re-traumatize ourselves. It really struck me that maybe even though I'm talking about attachment and CPTSD, we need to really talk about more the root of how we wind up as adults, either struggling with partners, with our parents still, and how much all of that can truly be connected to what happens to us in childhood. And that really, to me, is the source of all of this, is this concept around what creates trauma bonding. Now, I think that we don't really understand this dynamic as well as we should. I think it often gets written off sometimes as like, oh, just let your past go. You know, what happened to you is in the past. And yes, that is true. We don't want to live in the past every day. But so much of the past dictates where we are today. And that is especially true for how we end up in often unhealthy relationships as adults, which we often see described oftentimes in connection with creating narcissistic relationships or choosing narcissistic partners. And that the root of that is often tied to our early caregivers. And that what happens to us in childhood does affect who we choose, why we choose, whether we stay, whether we leave, how long we stay, how we deal with that person when we're in the relationship. And so let's just start with the root of this, which is, I love this word, the root of this, but it is this idea of trauma bonding. So trauma bonding is a term that Patrick Carnes described to sort of make sense of how we can find ourselves as adults in these intense, chaotic, toxic relationships that we often cannot seem to leave. But before we get into that, what I really want us to talk about today is what creates that. We are making choices from our unconscious child selves, trying to heal those wounds, trying to finally repair and get what we didn't get in childhood. And so what's really happening is that we are children with parents, and I think this is really true for borderline parents, even more so in some ways than narcissistic parents, but true for both of them, or any sort of parent who struggles with emotional regulation, with empathy, with validation, with consistent functioning in some regard, or who is not able to generally consistently attune to us. We get to experience, unfortunately, what is often called intermittent reinforcement. And so it's this inconsistent pattern of idealization and devaluation as children. We're safe, we're not safe. You love me, you're not happy with me. I'm a good child, I'm a bad child. And over time, that shapes our brain's functioning. And it begins to create this reward system of chemicals and this system where we are in fight or flight a lot. We are acting in survival mode, and or we are getting that love and that dopamine from all the good feelings, and that becomes addictive, that cycle of being loved and adored, or being seen, or being valued. Let's say for a narcissist, you're valuable when you are doing things that are an extension of me, but you're not so valuable when you're not. And with a borderline, it would be, in terms of emotional regulation, I felt slighted or rejected by you, and or I am struggling with my own emotions, but I can't manage those because I can't really hold the boundary and barrier between I'm the parent, I shouldn't put this on you, and you're the child. And then we also have this idea of making the child the parent's best friend, right? Relying upon the child. There's so many things around this that we could be rewarded for and discarded for. And that becomes addictive. And so as we grow up and we go into our adult lives, we are so often seeking to heal those wounds. And even though we say on the surface the person we're choosing is nothing like our parents, it's often the case that when we sort of peel back the layers of the onion and the true self of that person emerges, it often is a person who has qualities very similar to often those caregivers. Now, not all of the time, obviously, but it's often, even if they're just there in little traits, sometimes they can occur because what we're subconsciously doing is trying trying to heal those wounds. So this time I will get the love that I so wanted. This time I'll be seen. And we get stuck in that cycle. Now, if you think about attachment with a healthier partner, I think we can heal those bonds and those wounds, those trauma wounds. With a healthier partner, let's say, who's secure and they don't let us push them away or act out, assuming we're not super deep into our own mental health issues, there can be a lot of healing. And frankly, it can go truly also for those who have mental health issues. But I'm talking about general functioning that is somewhere in a more typical range, right? And so what happens is we often don't choose these partners. We choose partners who end up recreating that cycle. They give us that same intermittent reinforcement. So they love us, they're hurting us. And this is what makes it so hard to leave. This is why we call them trauma bonds. We have bonded to our caregiver in the trauma, and now we are bonding to new partners, which often in the beginning is fueled by, intimacy and excitement and a rush of hormones and all of those yummy chemicals we get when we are liking or loving someone. And that attaches us pretty quickly. But then what do you do when you wake up one day and realize this is actually not a good relationship, but this also feels so familiar. It feels like home in some way, in some crazy subconscious way. Now, we're not in these relationships going, well, this is like my childhood and I'm feeling triggered and I should be leaving. We might know we need to leave, but the deep well of connection is so deeply embedded in our psyche that it's really hard to leave those relationships. And I think that any caregiver, regardless of whatever they have, let's call it toxic parenting or mental health issue, but I think especially it's true around narcissism and borderline for different reasons, really makes it hard for us to choose caregivers who at the core don't have some of those qualities. And, the signs of those are things like, I know I should leave, but I can't. I find myself minimizing, justifying, or not talking about the things this person does to me or to my kids, because if I tell my friends or my parents, they're just not going to get it, or they already hate this person. They're never going to, understand. And they just don't understand that I love this person and they had a difficult childhood too. And I really get them. And if I just give them enough love, or if I just change the way I function, it will be just enough to get them to change. And when they change, it's going to give me what I so desperately wanted. And that's the root of this, right? At the core, we're not even necessarily focused on what they're going to do. It's that when they give us what we needed so desperately, we will finally be healed and loved inside. The problem is, for many people in toxic relationships that are trauma bonds, the person we've chosen is not capable and never will be capable. And that is a significant problem that will never be healed. And the reality is we have to leave those relationships in order to do so. And so how do we do that, right? We want to start with educating ourselves. I think doing work on your own attachment and your own healing, ideally with a therapist who has especially training in trauma backgrounds. I think that trauma-informed care is incredibly important, especially if you have a childhood with any kind of sort of CPTSD and or you are in a relationship with a narcissist or borderline, or you are. Doing that work, it can be really helpful to begin to make some repairs and create some awareness around what is healthy and what is not. Because you can imagine with a certain childhood, we don't even see it. We don't even see it that it's emotional abuse, because we've been living in emotional abuse most of our childhoods. And many people, which I'm going to make another video about in a minute, are still in the trauma bond with the original source, the parent. And that is still interfering greatly in our lives. And I don't think we talk enough about how many women, and it's men too, but how many women I have worked with that are still heavily active, acting out the mama trauma bond every day. They talk on the phone every day. They fight all the time. The mother's a borderline or a narcissist and often untreated. And they're just activating and living in their trauma again and again and again and re-traumatizing ourselves. And that is the video I'm going to release after I release these first two, because I realized, well, how do you get to re-traumatizing if you don't even really fully understand what the original trauma is, and if you are still in it before you can even recognize how to stop doing it, all right? So you want to look at your attachment system. You want to look at what are healthy relationships in my life and how do I shore those up and work on healing those and maybe building stronger bridges to those people. May not even know what healthy relationships are. And oftentimes with therapy, that's our first really healthy boundaried, hopefully, relationship with someone who, creates a safe environment where we can explore issues. I always say be a little bit challenged in a loving way to grow and develop and engage and take that relationship as a model. It's not the same as, a real relationship, but it is a real relationship. It just has some structure around it. But when you go into therapy consistently, you build this relationship that's safe, and as someone who sets boundaries with you too, they don't take your calls late at night, they don't email you all of the time. There's a healthy support there, but it's also has some structure to it. And you take that out in the world, it's the first template for many people, right? So that's a good resource. I know it's not possible for everybody, but I would say it would be an ideal situation. Definitely you want to stop being in a relationship with someone who is hurtful like this. And I know that getting out of it is the hardest part, and I'll make another video about that. But the truth is that trying to create no contact is often the healthiest way, because every time you take a little hit off that person, you break up, you don't talk for 2 months, you get needy, you reach out, you get that hit of literally addictive chemical reinforcement, and it really triggers those deep wounds and often sucks you back in, right? So working on no contact is incredibly important. Maybe trying to find new ways to engage in your life and the world, challenging yourself, maybe taking up new hobbies or experiences, really developing parts of yourself that maybe you had neglected because you were in this toxic relationship. Maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a new exercise program, maybe it's a new hobby like painting or an instrument, I don't know, or learning a language. And sometimes we need to just take a break from, relationships with other people in terms of like romantic relationships. It really does depend on where you are in this process. But if you don't do the work, you are destined to repeat it, right? It really is true. So I think that it's important to understand that you're not doing this to hurt yourself, but often you're acting from that deep place inside that is hard to stop. And you should know that you are worthy of getting the support that you need to heal those wounds. So I hope this helps explain the trauma bond. Many of you already know so much about this, but I really want to, honor the fact that we all have these experiences and it can be so difficult to change. So please know though that you are worthy of change and healing. And thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe and click the bell, and that way you'll be notified when I post new videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.